Hey guys, if you want to go ahead and sit in front, you can sit in front there. I apologize. We didn't think ahead in terms of the crowd that would be here. We would have had it in a different venue. I apologize for that, but we're here now. It won't be long. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we're going to take a roll call, and then we're going to all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. But first, give it over to Mrs. Sugars for roll call.
Mrs. Matlack.
Here.
Mrs. Neary.
Here.
Mr. Rossi.
Here.
Mrs. Seidel.
Here.
Mrs. Scarpolino.
Here.
Mrs. Schultz.
Here.
Mrs. Tong. Dr. Wong.
Here.
Mr. Goodwin.
Here. Now let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. This is a really exciting night for we have the opportunity to recognize a number of our teams and for the work they've done. We have the East girls cross country team and tennis team, the Cherry Hill West football team, and also we're going to have an opportunity to hear a bit of a preview from the Black History Month program, and then we'll have another presentation from Dr. Mahan. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith to take us through all the presentations now.
I'm learning. Last time I held the button the entire time. This time I just pressed it and then it's off. So it's fantastic to see so many students here. This is just a wonderful, wonderful way to start anything, including a board meeting, and to see students from both our high schools, just the best. So thank you all for coming out tonight to be here, to be recognized, and for all the hard work you put in through all the unseen hours over many, many, many months in different kinds of weather to get here tonight, and parents as well, because you're in the background supporting them the whole way. So and we appreciate all that you do along that journey. So with no further ado, I guess we'll go over to handing out the certificates. So.
Okay, good evening. As Dr. Smith said, we have 3 sports teams here tonight being recognized. The first that I'll go over, well, let me say first, when you get your certificates, you'll come up, you'll get your certificate from Dr. Smith. This is for the honorees. Shake his hand, then the board will want to congratulate you. You'll go around and shake their hands, starting over here with Mrs. Neary. You go around that U, then our administrators would also like to shake your hands. So you'll start with Mrs. Adrian and go down that row. Then we're going to go out that door, and Mrs. Wethington is going to take a picture of each group. Parents, if you want to go out for pictures as well, you're welcome to do that. You are invited to come back for the meeting. You're not required to stay for the meeting. So once your picture is taken, you have your certificate, you are good to go. So we're going to start with our East girls tennis team. They are being recognized tonight as 2018 conference champions and South Jersey Group 4 champions. Yes. They are coached by Mary Jewett, who is unable to attend tonight. I know there was some talk that Kelly Young might be here. Is she here? She is not here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead with the certificates. And first, and Dr. Perry is here too. Very good. So first we have Michaela Kennedy. Naomi Korn. Sophia Liang. Landon Tenenbaum. Mari Kamenker. Sanjana Doshi. Pallavi Gokuldas. And next we have Cherry Hill East Girls Cross Country. They are being recognized tonight as 2018 conference champions. We have, I believe these are in reverse alphabetical order for a change. So we have Anthea Zhang. Charles Wu. Emily Volan. Kelly Tram. Pooja Suresh. Isabel Slim. Iris Shi. Riva Sharma. Sabrina Rounds. Rebecca Rausch. Sarah Pierce. Maggie Murphy. Madison McNiff. Mary Kathleen McCurdy. Danny Lazarus. Eliza Kotzen. Catherine Hu. Anushka Gandhi. Leah Gallagher. Larina Fu. Emily Finnegan. Katie Farrow. Kira Federline. Christina Farley. Tabitha DiDonato. Amanda Chen. Jane Kaig. Alexa Budman. Sarah Brown. And Michelle Berry. Oh, he is. Yes. Yes. And Coach Anthony, would you like to say a few words? I'm sorry, I didn't introduce you in the beginning. Anthony Maniscalco, you want to say anything? Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I've actually been coaching the girls cross country team at East for 11 years, which is a position I never thought I'd be in. I came in with little coaching experience, and I had never worked coaching girls in the past. So it was a new experience, and I've learned a lot in the past 11 years. Just to keep it very brief, what I'll say is this year has by far been the most rewarding. I've been so lucky to coach amazing athletes over the past 11 years. But this year, it was about the team and the team aspect. And nothing's better than that. So thank you. This is great recognition of our program. Thanks a lot.
All right, last but not least, we have Cherry Hill West football. The West football team is being recognized as 2018 West Jersey Football League Liberty Division champions under the direction of Coach Brian Wright. Coach Wright, would you like to come up?
Alexa Castillo. Best statistician in South Jersey, Aiden Sperry. Jessica Gonzalez. Narina Cobb. Brianna Hand. I don't know if I've seen that. I don't think she's there. Seamus Curran. You got it. Jason Squishy Reyes. Lenny Fernandez. Mo Essa. Alex Can. River Banks. Carlos Gomez. Eli Kosame. Michael Alberto. Massimo Sullivan. Jeff Morris. Ansa Cooler. Dorian Davis. Nate Leto. Dom Umarino. Nick Jester. Johnny Iannucci. Bryce McGee. Joe Monterosa. Hakim Melvin. Aiden Gibb. Jake Shaw. Justin Bush. Chris Alabanzas. Desmond Hill. Charles Stewart. Sean Hill. Peter Owens. Odesco Bally. Tommy Giordano. Jeff Douglas. Amado de la Cruz. Chris Church. Max McCullough. Nick Arcaroli. Jalen Lewis. Louis Ragsdale. Dan Lozano. Jesse Filco. Luis Santiago. This isn't, he wasn't in the list. Yeah, I got to get you one, okay. Yes. That's it. This year, coming off the heels of a 1-8, 1-9 season, was a learning experience for everyone involved. The resiliency that our young men displayed out there on the football field, I have not seen very often in 19 years of coaching football at many different levels. I know they brought a lot of pride to our building over on the west side of town. Hopefully they brought a lot of pride within the district as well, which is one of our goals each and every time we step out on the field. So thank you for all the support throughout, and I look forward to doing this again next year.
Just one more thank you. I want to give our athletic director, Mike Burrell, just has done a fantastic job of not just athletically, but getting the we spirit, the CHPS spirit, which is a spirit of character and a spirit of good choices and commitment on and off the field. And Mike, I just want to say thank you very much for all you're doing. So
Yes.
All right, so we have one more presentation besides Dr. Mahan's. We're going to invite Mrs. Kathleen Jenkins to the microphone to talk about our Black History program coming up.
Thank you. The Black History Program is going to be on Saturday, February 23rd from 2 to 6 at Cherry Hill West. But I'd like to introduce Ms. Aaliyah Bowles, who is our creative director, and it's her vision that we are implementing. And we also have invitations to Mr. Goodman and Dr. Williams. I'll give you those while she's coming.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Bowles. I am a Cherry Hill East graduate, class of 2007. And this year, I am the creative director, producer, whatever you want to call it, for the Black History Month show this year. And I put together and wrote a show called A Seat at the Table, A History of Firsts. And it celebrates all of the amazing African American people throughout history who were the first to do certain things. The first athletes to win gold medals, first actors to win Oscars, first Black people on covers of magazines. We have a section about the Obamas. We have sections about different people throughout Black history who have brought seats to the table. And the kids have worked so hard, and they've choreographed some of the dances. They've put together some of the scenes with me. And we have kids from ages 8 to 18. And it's just been so amazing working with these kids, and it's been nice being back home and working with kids from East and West. And we would just love to have you all come see us, bring family, bring friends to support the kids. They've really worked really hard, and when kids feel the support from their town and their community, it just gets them really jazzed to keep doing great work. So like Ms. Jenkins said, it's going to be Saturday, February 23rd at 2 p.m., and again, it's called A Seat at the Table, A History of Firsts. Thank you.
So next on the agenda, we'll have to wait for Dr. Mahan to finish her other job of taking pictures of the kids to come in for the kindergarten committee update. And so I'm sure she'll be in just a moment.
That's the kind of traffic that we like in Cherry Hill. People being recognized. Yeah. Students.
So now we're ready for our kindergarten presentation.
I apologize. One of the great things that I get to experience in this position is seeing former students come through and be recognized. So a lot of Barton students, former Barton students, were recognized tonight. So it was great to see them, and some parents actually asked for pictures, which is so nice. So quick update on Kindergarten Curriculum Committee. This was all shared at the C&I committee meeting. We have completed all of the visits to the preschools in the district, over 25 of them, sharing that we are going to be expanding to full day kindergarten, getting some of their feedback and input, sharing with them registration dates, some Cherry Hill swag bags, and just telling them we hope that this will continue to be a partnership, and hopefully they can continue to provide information to parents of preschool age students that they have. One of the things that we asked them to provide was information on our parent information nights, where we will be sharing information in regards to full day kindergarten. Those evenings and locations, times have been posted on the district website. They are also advertised at all of the preschools as well as in all of our elementary schools. And we did select times and locations: east side of town, west side of town, morning presentations, evening presentations, midday presentations, presentations at Malberg, off-site at Trinity, as well as at the JCC. So we tried to cover all of our bases and making sure that we reach all families. The next thing is that we will be having a full webinar on February 14th for all current staff in the district who either teach kindergarten or who are interested in teaching kindergarten, to tell them in more detail about every step of the process that we have gone through in ensuring that we have a robust program. So that presentation includes things in regards to the schedule for the day, information on social emotional learning, information on play-based, information on technology and resources, as well as furniture. And the final thing I have is that we are excited to start kindergarten registration, which starts on March 1st. It will run March 1st to the 14th. We've condensed kindergarten registration from about a month and a half down to 14 days so that we can get appropriate projections for space across all of our 12 elementary schools. One thing that I will add that we are including this year is a push for literacy. So we have 2 texts that we have purchased for every student who registers for kindergarten, and we are hoping that we will send a message to parents, our love of literacy, our love of reading from the first time they step into our schools. And we also have those books for the teachers so that they can reiterate the same text when students come in September. So just a new added addition to welcome all of our incoming kindergarten families. We look forward to continuing our work, and we will have another update prior to the end of the year. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have correspondence. I know a few people mentioned they had correspondence. We'll start off with Mrs. Matlack, and then we'll go to Mrs. Seidel, and then Mrs. Scarpolino.
Okay, just very quickly, I wanted to say that I had gone over to West to see their play that they had, 110 stories about 9/11, and it was fantastic. It was amazing, what the kids conveyed through the show, and it was even more amazing when I learned and thought back that the students who were presenting it were not even born when 9/11 happened. It's hard to believe that it's been that long ago that we have there are students presenting this to us who were not even born. They did a talk back at the end, and they had some some people who had experienced the attacks also talk about it. Dr. Morton also spoke. He was at a vice principal or assistant principal, I believe, at a school in New York City when that occurred. Fascinating, powerful, and the kids did a tremendous job. So if you get a chance to, that is over, but if they do, when they do other ones, go see it. They really do a tremendous job. And the other thing I wanted to add is that I'm vice president of the Camden County School Boards Association, and tomorrow night we are having one of our 5 meetings. It's a joint meeting with Camden County and Gloucester County. If there are any board members who would like to join me, I'm driving down there. Let me know, and you're welcome to come with me for that meeting. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Seidel?
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I attended Senate President Steve Sweeney's first Path to Progress Town Hall on January 24th at Rowan College, Gloucester County. Eric Goodwin, Edward Wong, Dave Rossi, Jane Scarpolino, Sally Tong, Barbara Wilson, and Justin Smith also attended representing the district. We had representing Cherry Hill Township, Councilman Brian Bowerly, and there were several community members and parent advocates from the Fair Funding Committee representing Cherry Hill as well. Joining Senate President Sweeney at the event was Assembly Majority Leader Lou Greenwald, as well as Mark Pfeiffer, Assistant Director of Rutgers Local Government Research Center. The meeting was crowded, so crowded in fact that they had an overflow room 1 where I was seated, and then I came to find out there was an overflow room 2 where Dr. Smith was originally seated. So all in all, it was a well-attended event. The goal of the town hall was to outline the fiscal crisis facing New Jersey, which Mr. Sweeney says is driven by unsustainable pension and benefit costs that suppress economic growth and uncompetitiveness by crowding out needed investments in infrastructure, higher education, and the economic development that other states are making. He presented some key recommendations. I should say all 3 gentlemen presented some key recommendations to alleviate the crisis. The first focused on pension and benefit reform, such as shift all state and local government employees and retiree health care coverage from platinum to gold. They discussed shared services through several things, one being education reform, and they suggested merging all K-2, K-4, K-6, and K-8 districts into K-12 regional districts, which they believe would improve the quality of education and promote cost savings, and also shared services at the county and municipal government level, such as expanding shared services agreements. Another key recommendation was leveraging assets to stabilize the pension system. One item being discussed would be considering creating hot lanes or high occupancy lanes on major interstate and highways. Fixing our financial crisis would enable our legislators to fund critical programs and initiatives like provide $1.3 billion more in state aid to underfunded school districts and would help provide real property tax relief. They took just a few questions from the main room. Those of us in the overflow room weren't even able to ask questions. But we were lucky enough to have a Cherry Hill community member, who happens to be here tonight, Mrs. Stern, who was chosen to speak and shared a message about the importance of receiving our fair share, especially in light of our failed bond referendum and the state of our aging facilities. Mr. Goodwin was also able to speak to Sweeney and Greenwald after the event, and I would add that Mr. Greenwald referenced Cherry Hill many times throughout the presentation, and that was a positive for us. He used us as an example in at several moments. For anyone who wants more information on the Path to Progress program, it's pathtoprogressnewjersey.org. I also have this pamphlet that they passed out. Next, I represented Cherry Hill at the Camden County Educational Services Commission budget approval meeting on Wednesday, February 6th. The commission is made up of 35 districts in Camden County, and Cherry Hill holds a board of directors seat at that organization. So just because I was shocked to learn about how much this organization does, I thought I would just share with everyone here what CCESC provides, in case you didn't know, like I didn't know. One thing is they provide non-public school services. For example, they provide child study team services for non-public schools, and they also provide these child study team services for larger districts who may use them for overflow to handle caseload. They offer transportation services, offering consolidation for special education transportation by offering bus routes for students from multiple districts. They run the County Juvenile Detention Center. They offer school services to public schools, such as speech or OT, and they provide these services to, for example, a large district like Camden City. And this I found really interesting, they offer transition services, which is offering students work experiences in the community. And one program that they offer is called Project Search. This was a project that was piloted last year with 9 students. Cherry Hill was involved in that program. It was Cherry Hill, Camden City, and Lenape. Basically, it's a full immersion program with students who worked at TD Bank. And more to come on that program. I think that's great, and I'm glad that we had an opportunity to participate in that Project Search program. And then one other item that they provide is public relations and communication services to the districts in the county. The first item of business was to vote on the 2019-2020 budget, which passed, but most of the meeting was spent discussing a mental health initiative pilot program that CCESC is working on. Camden County had 2,000 students referred for in-crisis screening. I'm not sure over what time period. I didn't catch what time period, but the purpose of their pilot program is how do we keep kids in the schools and make sure that they are getting the support and help they need. They used an example that happened in our county where a child was referred out for crisis, and really it was just up to the parents to ensure that the student received those services. Unfortunately, the child committed suicide, never was sent for the services. The child committed suicide. So the goal of this is how can we handle this within our school districts and make it easier on the parents, and as a school district, we confirm that the child's getting the help they need. So they want to develop a turnkey solution for creating a school-based health center in partnership with a lot of other organizations within the state, and this will be a service that will take Medicare and private insurance from parents, again, to help alleviate some of the concerns with us referring parents out for these services. Be very interested to see the information and data from the pilot. They're going to choose 2 districts in the county to pilot this with, and they will share this information with Dr. Malash, Mrs. Sugars, and the board. And this will be really interesting for Cherry Hill because we currently contract for clinical services with, and I cannot remember the name of the organization that we contract with, but they again, as most meetings we go to, they refer to Cherry Hill, and then they were looking directly at me. This is a program I'm sure they'd like to pitch to us, and they indicated that it could be a cost savings for us in the future. So definitely more to come on that. And that's all. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. And now, Mrs. Scarpolino.
Thank you, Mr. Goen. Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to report that on January 29th, I had met with, there was a meeting with Senator Beach, James Beach, and this was organized by actually a community member who is here, Miriam Stern. Senator Beach participated, Ivy Brown Rovner, his chief of staff, was present also. Jen Fleischer, who's the zone PTA president, was there, and myself. It was a very positive and productive meeting. Senator Beach seems genuinely interested and committed to trying to help us obtain more funding. We sort of briefly discussed the fact that, you know, we've not been sufficiently funded by the state for 10 years at least, and it will take several more years before we get up to full funding, which probably doesn't even accurately address our demographics and changes now anyway, and also the bond referendum defeat, and then how to move forward. Talk a little bit about creative ways to get funding that doesn't involve the budgetary process, that we're not relying solely on that process. It was more of a brainstorming session. We came up with, you know, various ideas, talking about some, you know, whether it be advertising or sponsorships or grants. And I did mention that we would be starting discussions on those very issues in the Policy and Legislation Committee, which we did do this week, and I'll be reporting on a little later. Let's see. We also discussed, you know, again, Senator Beach was very interested in trying to think of brainstorm ways to kind of help us and further our cause. We discussed a lot about how there's this perception, or really a misperception, that we are this rich district and we're almost victims of our own success, right? We're a very well high-achieving district. We've made sure to keep our resources in the most valuable aspects of our education, right, our staffing and things like that, and so our facilities have suffered greatly. But there is a perception that maybe we don't really need the money. So one of the things we discussed was we discussed possibly having some officials or an official from Trenton come down and tour our buildings, see our facilities, see what our needs really are, what our district really looks like. And again, the fact that our demographics have changed and we're not the same district that they might have thought we were 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. So that's something we're thinking about trying to arrange. He had also asked us to provide him with some data on our special education's needs, especially even some background information, especially on extraordinary aid needs, because again, that's something that has been changing and growing in the district, and he wanted to just have a better understanding of some of that data so that he could be a better advocate for us. And I know that we are in the process of gathering information for him and clarifying exactly what he's looking for. So all in all, I would say it was just a really great meeting. It was the first I'm sure many we're going to have. I think it was very collaborative, and everyone was sort of on the same page of wanting to see what we can do to do everything we can to get some funding for our community and to get Trenton to understand who we really are and what our needs really are. So, and I thank Mrs. Stern for inviting me to this meeting because I thought it was very helpful. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other correspondence? Oh, Dr. Wong.
Would you like to talk about the impact meeting last Friday?
Go for it.
Oh, okay. just Mr. Goen and I were invited to this impact. Impact stands for Increasing Male Practitioners and Classroom Teachers. So that's the program at Rowan. So there was, I think the meeting was organized by George Guy and also Dr. Lawyer Chapman. And they came here for a whole morning and plus lunch, I believe. And they toured our Cherry Hill East and also West. And then from the school district, Dr. Smith, Dr. Mayhem, and the principals of Cherry Hill West and the East, together with a group of students, they escort them and show them the classrooms and how we teach students and so on. And of course, Mr. Goen and I and other people give some greetings, and hoping that when they graduate and if they consider teaching career, then they possibly would think about Cherry Hill, because this is part of the effort to recruit minority staff members. So that's it.
Thank you. Yes, it was a great event. It was focused on getting minority or underrepresented males to come into the schools and teach, and it was a really good event. And also, I have to say that it was the town hall was really a great event, and it was really cool. And I just have to say with Assemblyman Greenwald, his comment on Cherry Hill and how we've been impactful in terms of really making sure our needs were known. And all the groups, various groups, community-wise, from town council to our fair funding group and others, it was really, I guess I have to say, I was really proud to be a part of the community. It was like, oh wow, it was really cool. I do have one other item of correspondence that I want to talk as a board, and also have Mr. Green weigh in on this. We received a request, I received a request for a board member, for board representation, I should say, on the fair funding group. And I know in the past, we've been kind of reluctant to do that, just from the standpoint of if a board member's there, are they really, they can't really represent the board per se, because we only have authority when we're sitting around the table. But what I wanted to do for a few minutes just here, related to that correspondence, is number one, ask Mr. Green if he could just give us a little background on what the possible issues could be, and then also discuss as a board and really consider having a board representation on that committee. I think they're doing great work, but I just wanted to talk through it as a board.
As you basically stated, the part of the difficulty is that board members do not have individual authority. The board as a whole only has authority when it meets together. So you'd have to be very careful that any representative who attends really could not act as a spokesperson for the board. Only the president can act as a spokesperson for the board, and then only with the consent of the majority of the board. A representative could attend to bring information back to the board, to act as sort of an emissary. But it would pretty much have to be a one-way communication. That person could really not convey the board's position on anything, would have, under the ethics code, would really have to basically serve only to basically gather information and bring it back to the full board and report to the board. So that was how it would have to work. I mean, so certainly you could have a representative attend, but everyone would have to understand that that person really has no authority to speak for the board. It's really more to hear what the group has to say and bring that back is how it would have to work. So it's kind of a one-way communication in terms of that.
Thank you. And with that being said, I'll throw out my concerns, and I want to hear from other board members with any concerns. Or I really think it would be valuable to have a board member there, even though they could only listen for the most part and not really contribute to the discussion. I just wouldn't. I guess one of the concerns I would have is that if we have representatives there, if the community misunderstands that they can't speak out and speak for the board because of ethics issues, if they misunderstand that, they would, it could be it end up being a negative thing by having representatives there. If the community comes back and says, well, why did they even come? You know, they can't tell us anything about what's going on the board. So that's one of my thoughts, but I did want to have a brief conversation, and if any other board members have any thoughts on that. Ms. Seidel.
Thank you. So I know, Mr. Goodwin, you and I already talked about this a little bit, but I would be in support of having board representation. I see this as very similar to when we rotate through and sit in at our zone PTA meetings. Again, we sit as a observer. Occasionally we answer a question that has already been discussed in public or was already voted on, information that's already been agreed upon by the whole board. But for the most part, we're an observer at the zone PTA meetings, and we'll bring information back to other board members as necessary, or could report out during correspondence or during a work session as necessary. So I would see this setup similar to that and would be in support of that.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's important we would have somebody there. I think there is always that risk that people are like, why are you here if you're not contributing? But I think there's already a perception out there that we're hands off and that we're letting the community do all the heavy lifting and we're not involved. So I think that's a greater concern. I think, again, as Mrs. Seidel mentioned with Zone PTA, when we do the rotation there now, we don't have to always explain ourselves as to why we're there, but perhaps maybe in the beginning with the Fair Funding Committee, taking a minute or two just to explain, you know, something we could either write up ourselves or Mr. Green could give us about why, what the ethical considerations are and why we're here as more of an emissary and a conduit to get information from that group back to the board so that everyone's on the same page. And even if we had to do it every meeting, because maybe the people who attend are going to be different every meeting, but I think eventually people would understand that that is the constraint. So I think that, again, the benefit of being there would outweigh any disadvantage of people wondering why we can't more fully participate.
I just want to admit that actually I attended two Fair Funding meetings last year. But I did not say anything. I was just sitting there, but I should have reported to the board meetings last year. But I was a little bit awkward, and I did not. Maybe I should have consulted Barry Dickinson at the time, but anyhow, I attended two meetings, and so I just heard them out, and so yeah. So I will also support that, of course, from now on, and we have a regular person, not me like a secretively, at that meeting. So.
I know I was just going to reiterate Jane's sentiment. I do think it's important, one, and then it gives you a formal report back to the board that doesn't then say that a community member from Fair Funding needs to come back and do that as well. So I think that's important, and then that shows that collaboration. That's not asking them to attend another meeting to provide us with that update, and then they see that update publicly.
Thank you.
I just want to ask a question. To clarify, are we talking about the Cherry Hill Fair Funding or the FFAC, Fair Funding Action Committee?
We received a request from Cherry Hill.
Cherry Hill, okay. So nothing on the Fair Funding Action Committee. Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood it. We do have very active community members where the participation part is, we can leave that up to them, and I would be in support of this. And with the statement, I think that would be understood why there was no participation. So I would be.
Okay.
I think I'm in agreement. Again, set proper expectations at the beginning of the meeting. I think we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, board members sit in on other committee, other meetings as well, as Lisa said. And when we, like Jane, I believe you're on the wellness committee, and you've come back and reported, some things of that. I think we would just, and Mr. Green could speak to this if necessary. We just have to be careful when we come back and report that we are just reporting what we heard and not advocating for or against something that was heard. It was, just like we do when we go to Zone PTA. We certainly don't report back every time we're at a Zone PTA meeting, but sometimes we do say, something that was a big discussion item, So, but other than that, we already are doing that. So, since the request came through, I'm in favor of it.
Cool. Well, I think that's a consensus. We're definitely going to look to have representatives attend those meetings, and we'll move forward on that. The other thing I think we should consider is actually occasionally on a periodic basis, maybe having representatives from Fair Funding present to the board and tell us, you can, even though we hear it back from the individual board members, it would be great to maybe hear directly from the other Fair Funding members. So just a thought. With that, I will take that, and I'll definitely look to have representatives appointed to attend meetings in the future. Okay, that's all I have from a correspondence standpoint. And with that being said, we're now at our first public comment. So this first public comment, there will be 2 opportunities for a public comment this evening. This first public comment session is for agenda items only. There will be another public comment section for any topics at the end of the meeting. If you would like to speak now, please identify the agenda item, speak into the microphone, and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer will be green at the beginning of the 3 minutes. When the timer turns yellow, there's 30 seconds left. When the timer turns red, your time is up, and please conclude your comment. I know for small meetings like this, I've kind of been a little fuzzy on the timing, but I was informed that I probably should be stricter and and stick to it, because making exceptions in one time, I don't want anyone to feel left out. So anyway, are there any comments at this point in time on agenda items?
Rick Short, 1002 Chilton Parkway. Mr. Goodwin, I'm in reference to page 28 in the section under non-public school security plans. I do understand that it is a state mandated thing that, we give money to the other schools that are not considered public schools, which is fine. But I think we should also remember that, we're still not where we are or where we need to be, and hopefully coming this this next budget series, we find that 2.6 million. Some of the things in the other schools that they're some of the other schools, what they're getting is, you can see it right there under the Frostman Truth Institute. You can see perimeter fencing, something that wasn't in our bond or in our security plan. And my next comment is under page 22, under the area of bids, under busing. I think the big thing the district often misses in its PR campaign is to mention to people that you guys do use what's called Bus Boss. Bus Boss is a program that helps the Cherry Hill School District plan the best possible meetings, so that's in reference to that. And then finally on page 24, under donations, it's great to see donations coming in from various, from Sharp to Kilmer, but I think we can do more. I would suggest either the Cherry Hill Education Foundation or somebody in this town form a foundation for actual repairs or improvements. 92% of people in Cherry Hill, this is just from polling, with a 95% confidence rate and an 8% margin of error. It's a little high on the margin of error, but is telling you that people want to help. And to take it to a second level, I'm proposing a bill to Assemblyman Greenwald to allow anyone to donate through property taxes to schools. Yes, it's a massive thing. Yes, I think it can be done. Yes, if people have extra money and want to take it out of their property taxes and donate it, they should. Also, when I speak up here, I understand that 20% of the people that may be listening won't give 1 cent to the schools. But until this school district starts doing creative things about foundations, other sources of revenue, maybe that 20% will turn and will be more supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. I should have been a little bit clearer earlier. Actually, we're only focused on the action agenda for right now. Any comments on the action agenda? Okay. If not, then. Oh. Okay. I will mention this one thing. For anything on the agenda where you see Cherry Hill funds going to non-public schools, it's not Cherry Hill's money. It's money coming from the state. Cherry Hill is just the conduit that allows the money to pass to. It's not money that was ever intended for Cherry Hill. It's coming from the state to those schools. Okay. With that, we're going to move on in our agenda, and we're going to start off with our action agenda. And first on is Dr. Wong with curriculum and instruction.
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. One, approval of attendance at conference and workshops for the 2018-2019 school year. And number two, approval to accept the reallocated Title I Part A funds. Do I have a second? Mrs. Madlack. Any questions? Seeing none.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpellino?
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes. Next we have BNF. And Mrs. Schultz, will you move that for us, please?
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of bill list. Number 2, non-public schools revised security plans. Do I have a second? Mrs. Scarpellino, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Schultz?
I need to abstain from Beata Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
I do abstain to item V743, which is pertains to me specifically. Yes to all the rest.
Mrs. Seidel?
I need to abstain with respect to CDW on the bill list. Yes to the remainder.
Mrs. Scarpellino?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Next, we have Human Resources, and I'd like to ask Mrs. Seidel to move those items, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, assignment salary change non-certificated. Number 6, other compensations certificated. And you have a pink sheet in front of you which has additions to item 1 and item 6. Do I have a second? Ms. Scarpellino, any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpellino?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong?
I abstain from item 3 involving Rowan University, and yes to the rest.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. And next we have Policy and Legislation. Mrs. Scarpellino, will you move those, please?
Certainly, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, I move to affirm all HIB decisions except reversing incident 196898. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Scarpellino?
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Scarpolino. We don't have any items to move under strategic planning, but I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Matlack to have short discussion around the bond referendum and the meetings that we've had, and I'll let her lead that.
Okay. We've had 2 town hall community meetings so far, and there were several board members at each of them, so I just wanted to open it up to the board members to ask if they had any comments on that or any thoughts that they wanted to share on those meetings. Mrs. Seidel.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. So I was able to attend both meetings. I thought they were great. We had a good representation of the community at the meetings, and that's what I wanted to point out. I think we had some demographics that we usually typically have difficulty getting feedback from. For example, I met a few folks at the first town hall that are Cherry Hill residents without children in the school district. We also had residents on community members on Saturday's meeting that were seniors that had children in the district but don't have children in the district now. So I'm glad to see that we're getting the representative population that we were hoping for. Of course, love to see even more people at the next 3, but I was pleased to see different demographics represented at the events so far.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mrs. Schultz.
I had a comment written down from the town hall meeting on February 9th. One of the community members had shared how do we incorporate our senior citizen population into the school district, and I'm not saying tonight, but put that down as an item to kind of discuss. Is there ways that we can open up the gym, the auditorium? I know far-fetched, but even maybe working with the town to build pickleball courts. I know that that's something that DICU, they are like, you can't get on the courts, but if there's any like space that we could partner with town halls or something like that. But that was something that I actually wrote down as something that would be good for us to talk about or have some discussion on.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Rossi.
Thank you. I attended both of them as well. The numbers, we would all probably like to see more people out there, but the people that were there were very engaged. A lot of great ideas, and there was a lot of good discussion at the end. Everyone was able to provide feedback. A lot of big picture discussions as well, really broad and long range is what I kept hearing at one of them. So I guess we're at the point where we continue this process and listen to the community, let the process play itself out, and then regroup and go from there. I think we'll get there. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Mrs. Scarpolino.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was not able to attend either of those, but I will be at the others. So I was just curious if at the end, was there any feedback from the people who were there about how it worked, how the forum worked? Were there things they liked, didn't like about it, you know, in case we wanted to tweak things for future meetings?
Dr. Judy Wilson, who ran both of the sessions, and I have to say, she's done a phenomenal job, of running them. Let me just take a little drink here. And keeping everything on track and running the sessions the same, so that so that everybody who comes gets the same experience. Everything is being recorded that everybody says or suggests, and that's all being compiled. I don't believe that anybody was asked about feedback about the process. Was that asked? I didn't think so. Okay. So maybe that's something that we can think about, getting that feedback from everybody. But yeah, Dr. Wilson is doing a great job of, presenting this to the community, keeping everybody on track, and working through so that we get the responses from the community members, regardless of which meeting they attend.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mrs. Neary.
Yeah, I also attended both. I felt it was actually quite a good turnout and a nice cross-section, as Lisa had indicated, of the community coming out and speaking. I also heard the same thing, long-term, big picture, looking forward. That was something I heard, especially regarding the questions, was a look forward versus focusing on what went wrong.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I also really thought the meetings were well attended. I appreciate even the first meeting we had a member from Town Council, Mrs. Doshi, who attended, and I believe they're going to try and have more members from Town Council attend a future meeting. So I thought it was really good that we were able to have that kind of attendance and even have support from Town Council. So I thought it was a really worthwhile and very productive meeting. I agree with you that Mrs. Wilson did a great job conducting those.
So anybody else? No. There will be 3 more meetings, 2 more in February. Doing this from memory, I think it's February 21st and February 25th. And okay, we have people checking on that, and I do know that the March date is March 10th. Okay, I have it on my phone, but my phone is away. So 2 more dates in February 20-something twice, and then March.
The 21st.
The 21st.
Is at Johnson.
Is at Johnson.
That's at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
The 25th is at West.
Good, I have
That's
them.
at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
And the final one in March is at Rosa at 1 o'clock. Yes, 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There we go. So for anybody watching this this meeting at home, please mark those dates down and come out and attend. Bring your neighbors, bring your friends, and come and participate and let us know what you think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. So next we're going to go into our committee report outs, and we're going to start with curriculum and instruction and Dr. Wang.
Thank you. Again, we have a full agenda meeting and the last about 2 hours. So a lot of things that have been discussed and presented, and I will do as briefly as possible. First one is the kindergarten curriculum committee update that Dr. Mahan just did. But at the CID meeting, and we had a parent who is a Spanish professor at Rutgers, but she's also the mother of children in our school district. And she gave us very good reviews about the committee's work, and she thinks that our four-day kindergarten would become a model for the state. So it's really a glowing review, and so that's basically the first item. The second was presented by Kate Seegers, who is the curriculum supervisor I think in charge of ELAS, right? I mean the language arts. Right? She talked about the revised secondary ELA tax review forms. The form was mainly for school administrators and the teachers and also principals. So there's some changes. The major change was it's adding not just the content of the review, but also the Lexile level, so corresponding to the texts. And then she talked about the summer readings. The summer reading list has been approved by the board already. And then she made some changes, replacement of some texts in light of the feedbacks from the students and the teachers. And then I don't want to go to the details of the changes that is both for the high school summer reading as well as the middle school summer reading. Then she also mentioned this ESL program, which has seen more students participating from last year to this year. Is about 100 students more, and then they're going. I mean, we are going to pilot this new text with online website called Inside and Edge, provided by National Geographical programs, and she thought that that's pretty well laid out program that we will try that in several schools. And then followed by a major, I would say, discussion on the mass pilot program. That is, we have been using, I think, the Envision program in all our schools, but I think 3 years ago that in Johnson and later followed by Knight and Kilmer, then we began to introduce a new math program called the Eureka, and then the presenters Michelle Smith and math coach Patrick McHenry, and they both liked that program well, and they also presented data showing that this Eureka is much better reviewed. I think the positive review rate was like over 70% versus the previous one, Envision. And also they say that the Eureka somewhat complies the state standard. So the idea is that they're going to do another survey among the students and the teachers, and they're going to, and they also present again in our March meeting, and then followed maybe by an item on the agenda for us to adopt throughout the district. And then we, Dr. Mahan talked about the family life curriculum. That's only one school that had about 15 students. Some of the students are from the same family, but the other schools only have maybe 3 or 4 family opted out from the family life curriculum, but only one school is having a little bit more people. So that's the family life program. Then we are talking about the booklet, which has been out, right, on Friday. So some updates, and we are mostly using the new format and mostly accessible online. But we have also prepared about 50 hard copies for some of the families. And then another pretty big presentation on the mid-year review of the district goals. And again, it was presented by Kate Seegers on the language side, then Michelle Smith on the math side, and also Scott Goldsberg talking about world language and some others. And basically, the assessment has been done throughout our schools from K to 12, and we have found some weaknesses among certain student groups, like the Hispanic students as well as the African American students. They also have been underperforming, maybe in different ways, and so on. But then they also found other students who will be doing pretty well. But in general, the impression was that we still have the gaps among our students. And so I understand this is our board goal to overcome or address this issue. So it looks like the assessment has shown that we have made some progress in some particular grades and so on, but overall, we still need to do some more works. And then some updates. I would say graduation requirement remains the same, and middle level committee has also done some progress and so on. So I don't want to get into that since the minutes are open to the public. Then lastly, we have public comments by 2 pupils from the same family, and they, I think the main issue they talk about is why back is still only having 2 years of world language versus other 2 middle schools that they have 3. So they hope that somewhat we can help address that, make it more consistent. So here's the report. Thank you.
Thank you. A great report. Next, we on the agenda, we have BNF and Mrs. Schultz.
So the BNF committee met Tuesday, February 5th at 6 p.m. at Carusi Middle School. And we had some project updates that started with Mr. Middleton, who provided an update on the parapet wall at the East Auditorium. So he informed us that some additional probe work on the interior of the auditorium had been done, as the scope of the project is still being determined. Mr. Middleton is aware of the district's timeline for the budget submission and will provide cost estimates for the project as soon as he is able. So we do have 2.5 of capital reserve funds for the project set aside. If additional funding, though, is needed, it may impact the use of capital reserve funds for other projects. So when we were talking about this, it did foster discussion about whether repairing the walls was worth the expense, and if replacing the auditorium should be considered and discussed. So Mr. Middleton said that he could provide the analysis of that option after the final analysis had been concluded and the cost was finalized for us. Some additional project updates. The work on the transformer room project at East is going well. The walls have been removed and in the process of being rebuilt. That is looking to be completed around spring break. The cameras and the swipe card access has been installed at Payne and Woodcrest Elementary Schools, and they are operational. The vestibules are continuing and should be completed again by spring break. And then the camera and the card access is 80% complete at High School West and should begin at High School East shortly. So then next, Ms. Sugars started to provide an update on the budget development for the 2019-2020 budget. Most important, the governor's address has been moved from the end of February to March 5th. The state aid numbers are slated to be released on March 7th, with no change made to the date on the statutory deadline budget submission of March 21st. So the initial budget was slated to be approved at the March 12th board meeting, so we may be looking to change that date. We also reviewed the status of the state required position control roster, which must be submitted with the budget. The county office has requested additional employee benefit information to be submitted in addition to salary information. They didn't give the district much time. They notified us late January, so the personnel department and business office are in the process of compiling all that information. We talked about the transportation department and soliciting renewals on busing contracts due to the contract increase being only 1.5%, that it may force the busing companies to maybe not want to renew at that amount, and it may force the routes to be put out to bid. And then it was reported that the state is $690 million short in revenues this year. We're not sure how the state aid numbers are going to affect us at this point, but by the March committee meeting, more information on the budget will be provided. And then lastly, Ms. Sugars updated the board on the status of the goals for the 2018-2019 school year. The facilities department has a new management team, has made many changes to the department. The skilled labor positions that have been difficult to fill despite many efforts. The culture of the department is being addressed and positive feedback has been received from the employees. The district calendar is almost fully implemented, and a final decision on the online board meeting format will be made shortly. Changes have been made in the areas of budgeting as it pertains to the facilities department, the technology department, and per pupil spending. We did have 2 members of the public. One commented on the West Auditorium and how a repair of the old auditorium turned into the building of a new auditorium, and another expressed concerns about the budget timeline and the East Auditorium parapet wall issue. Are there any questions?
Regarding the timelines for East and the parapet wall, is it just the auditorium, or is the scope bigger, or are we looking at the building as a whole?
For that particular project, we're just looking at the parapet wall. We discovered that issue when we were replacing the roof there. We do have some other wall issues at East, but right now our focus is on the parapet wall issue.
Okay, and we don't know cost yet? Or we have no estimate or idea?
We are waiting on Mr. Middleton, and as Mrs. Schultz said, we discussed it at length, and he is aware of the fact that we need to put this budget together, so we're hoping to have some estimates. We're meeting with him on Thursday, so we're hoping that perhaps on Thursday we will have some numbers.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're good.
Thank you. All right, moving on to Human Resources and Mrs. Seidel.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The Human Resources Committee met on Tuesday, February 5th at Carusi Middle School, and this is new for me, but most of what we discussed is confidential in nature, but I can discuss just a few items. One of the items that you voted on the Human Resources agenda tonight were discussed in our meeting, and that is 2 Cherry Hill West art teachers and 5 Cherry Hill East English teachers being approved for teaching an additional class. We also reviewed the job description for the teacher of world language Chinese, and you will see that new job description placed on your February action meeting agenda in a couple weeks. And then the last thing that I can share with you is that the HR committee was updated on the recruitment plan for the 2019-2020 school year as the district prepares for the implementation of full-day kindergarten. And as a result of that preparation for full-day kindergarten, the teacher transfer period was moved up earlier, and that's going to be from February 19th through March 4th, and that information was shared with several of the bargaining units just earlier today. So that is all that I can share at this time. Our next HR committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 5th. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next, we have P&L and Mrs. Scarpolino.
Thank you. We did not have any policies for first or second reading. We had just discussion and information items, and I felt a little bit like of C&I because we had quite a few of them but we did manage to get through most of it. We started off with discussing the community forums. Mrs. Sugar shared information about the upcoming ones that, obviously hadn't happened yet because our meeting was on February 4th prior to them. Mrs. Sugars indicated that the survey would be finalized after the first 2 forums to make sure we were addressing what community, not only what we know we want feedback on, but what community members want to discuss with us. So we talked about that, making sure that was happening. We did talk a little bit about the fact that for the high schools, we were it's felt that the town hall was a better format, and just ensuring that we got a good cross section of students, not just SBA or whatever, so that all groups feel they're being heard just like we want for the forums and the surveys. Then we kind of skipped around a little bit because the next item we talked about were the board goals update for 2018-2019, and it was number 3, enhanced communications and relations with internal and external stakeholders. So we thought that was kind of a natural segue since we were talking about this in terms of the bond referendum. Again, Ms. Sugars indicated how social media platforms and the use of them is really growing within the district. All of the platforms, with the biggest one being Facebook. The district website, for example, had almost 2 million views. We discussed a little about, is there ways to sort of tease out, is it the same person going back 100,000 times, or how does that work? If there's ways to do that, which I think we're going to try to look into. There was discussion that there's some analytics to see not just who's using it, but where it's getting shared. So if somebody's looking at something on one of our platforms, how is that getting disseminated to others in the community? We did talk a good deal about the fact that social media is here to stay, so we want to make sure that we really do use it to our best of our ability to communicate with all the stakeholders. And I know myself, and I think a couple of the board members were discussing how we thought what we're doing with the bond referendum, the various ways we're reaching out to the community and trying to ensure that we get a cross-section of all stakeholders would be something we'd like to see expanded with communicating generally with the community and with all stakeholders. For example, if we wanted to do community forums or town halls, whatever we want to call them, again and again, not getting into any specifics, but whenever there's maybe a big enough issue that we would want to have input, being able to sort of say every so often we're going to advertise and hold these so that we could have more of a discussion with our community, because again, one of our big problems is this is not the format for that, right? The board meetings are for us to do our work in public, but not with the public, and that can be very frustrating for the public when they come. So having other outlets where they can communicate would be helpful, I think, and also talking about how, although we, I think, have some really great platforms out there, that's more passive, and then some of these community groups where sometimes people spend a lot of time on those aren't necessarily then going to come to ours, having an ability to, again, there are systems out there that can flag you for certain things, not that somebody has to 24/7 look at the groups, but to be able to say, that's a great question, here's where that answer can be found, or here's the link to that. So again, not the forum to be getting back into a back and forth with the public, but just an ability to provide information and links and things like that to information, to where that information is, because we do have that information and we're not trying to hide it. It's just the public's not understanding, or we're not conveying where to access it. So I felt that was a really good discussion. And let's see. 2 handouts with updates to the goals were provided to all the P&L members, and Dr. Smith also gave a summary of each. And per this discussion about the community forums, that info has been added to the Genesis portal screen, login screen. So again, that's a place where parents tend to go. So it'd be good to have it there so that they see it and don't have to go searching for it. Then next we talked about creative revenue streams. And again, one of the things we were talking about was a document that, again, our community member, Mrs. Stern, had provided to myself and Mrs. Seidel one time, and we thought it would be worthwhile putting on the P&L agenda for discussion. It's creative revenue streams and public schools from the NSBA Council of School Attorneys. And copies of this article was distributed to all members. We will be discussing each article subheading at the next meeting, but sort of more preliminary discussion at this point, but giving everyone a chance to sort of look at ways of doing that. One of the things that we did understand, and I really tried to emphasize, was that if we decide to go in any of these directions, if we decide to create policy to allow us to accept or solicit other revenue streams, that we would need to be very careful in our language in drafting the policy, so that would be very narrow and clean, and there would be no no instance where an inappropriate maybe entity would want to advertise or sponsor something at our schools. And so I think we're going to be involved with Mr. Green quite a bit if we decide to go down that route, to make sure that we have a very clear policy to avoid those issues, because they will come up, and they have come up for other school districts. Next, we discussed having the possibility of remote attendance at board meetings. And again, an NJSBA article called Open Public Meetings, Art and Technology was distributed to all the P&L members. And the article summary was basically that this is sort of a gray area that boards of eds have to develop policy on. And again, it would be, not sound like a broken record, but we would want to be very clear, very narrow in our language if we decide to do something like that, so that there's no worries of abuse of the policy, or that in some ways someone might not really be fulfilling their responsibilities if they are not present. Because we did talk about the fact that part of the reason we do our work in public is so the public can be here and see us and us engage. But we understand there are times when that may not be possible. So again, if we decide to go that route, we'll be working with Mr. Green on how to develop a policy on that. And then next we talked about student, because we went a little out of order, student representation at the Board of Education meetings. It had been brought up by a community member that they had felt that perhaps the alternative high school program students should have representation at the board meetings. And right now we have obviously representation from our two high schools, East and West. And I just got to find my notes on that. Oh, here it is. And what the discussion was sort of that Dr. Smith said there was sort of a plan that was determined by Dr. Malash, Dr. Chapman, Mrs. Wethington, and himself to have a student or students, you know, maybe an alternate also, from the alternative program voluntarily present like 2 times a year, maybe 1 time in the spring and 1 time in the fall, about the great things that are going on in the program, which are, you know, we would like to hear about that. But again, the goal is to make it voluntary, and it's for it to be, you know, supportive of the students, because we want the students to be successful. We don't want anyone to feel like they have to come do this or they're not comfortable with the process. Dr. Smith also discussed the connected topic of the differences between what is a school and what is a program. The alternative high school is really a program. The students really belong to their home school. We call it school sort of to capitalize on the positive qualities of the word for the students, but ultimately their transcripts, diplomas, et cetera, read from East or West. And when they do extracurriculars and that sort of thing, they do that with their home schools. So it's not an attempt to make them a separate entity, but they are doing sometimes separate things here. So that might be a way to sort of ease into doing that. And that would not require a policy change at this point, because it would be more of a presentation than representation. So I think that's a good first step to see for all parties how that works out. And then lastly, even though none of us wanted to really talk about it, Mr. Smith did, Dr. Smith finally got in a fact about the district regulations and reviewing them. The regulations, 1,000 through 9,000, I believe it is, have been distributed to the appropriate administrative offices and people who would sort of work with those regulations to get reviewed and get their feedback. Then it would go back to the regulation committee to go over, and then, lucky us, it comes to the board. But it wouldn't need board approval, because they're the regulations. We would make the policies. They would just be for our information, and you know, another set of eyes on it can never hurt. And we established at that meeting that I kind of like doing that kind of stuff anyway. So sorry, the rest of you are getting dragged down with me, but and I think that was about it. We did have some public comments, and if I can read my handwriting, I will let you know what they were. A community member had come to ask about our policy on international travel, and she was asking that could possibly be reconsidered, because as it stands, you know, in 2017 we adopted a policy that does not allow for teachers, administrators, if they want to run programs outside of out of school, that's fine. And a lot of that was happening, but was being sort of not necessarily marketed, but perceived as being sponsored by the school when they weren't necessarily truly being sponsored programs. So now there's, you know, they can do those, but they can't be using school time and resources and the internet, you know, our own to promote those. And so she just asked that be something we maybe take a look at again, because there are some good programs like the Quebec program that I guess some parents are fearful that may not run in the future because of sort of that limitation. And I think that was, oh, and someone had asked whether the forums would be live streamed or recorded, which they were being. Both, right? Both, okay. And I believe that was it. So, any questions? Mrs. Schultz.
The articles that were passed out, can those be shared with us in the Friday packet at this time, or?
Sure.
It'll be in the Friday. I'll put it in the Friday memo. Yeah. Never hurts to share something once or twice, you know.
Jean. Oh,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to thank you for having or starting the creative revenue discussion, because that was something that we heard from several community members at the forums. So I think it's very timely that we're having that discussion now. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about it as you guys go through the document.
Yeah, I do think it's something that we definitely should be looking at. Again, I put my lawyer hat on. We do need to be cautious, because back in my former life when I practiced, a few doozy things came up when I was working with the University of Connecticut. So believe me, if it can happen, it will happen if we're not very careful in how we do it. Sorry, anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scarpolina. Okay, we did not have a strategic planning meeting. Those are on hold, at least for now, until after we get through the whole bond referendum thing, and then we'll continue those again in the future. So with that, we are now ready for our second public comment section. If you'd like to speak, you can speak now, and please speak into the microphone clearly. State your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer will be green at the beginning. When the timer turns yellow, there are 30 seconds left to speak. When the timer turns red, your time is up, and please conclude your comments.
Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road. I'm going to talk really fast. First of all, thank you so much to the board, the level of openness and interaction with the community, the collaboration. It's exciting to me, and I'm very grateful to all of you that are so actively engaged with the community. So thank you. Specifically, thank you to Jane for, at the very last minute, attending that meeting. So I really appreciate it. I apologize for the late notice. A few things. Grateful for the issue of fair funding being brought again as an important topic. I think last year the visibility of many school districts, Cherry Hill a little bit in the background, other school districts, was really critical to helping a law get passed. And as you've discussed, there's grave concern that the law is not going to be adhered to in terms of our funding. I think I've shared before, it's confusing to me as a community member how the district can put a ton of emphasis on educating the community and giving lots of information and support and effort and heavy lifting for the bond. But in last year's kind of like the last 200 yards of the race, there wasn't the level of visibility from the administration and not quite as much from the board. And I think that really is critical to making it clear that we're not going away and we're not going to accept being continued to be underfunded, because we see the terrible impact. I just, not only the idea of reporting here, but also representation at the Fair Funding Action Committee, which is a larger group with more leverage and more pressure on the state as a group, I think is really important to see our district, whether it's the district, employees, administration, Board of Ed, get involved. I would love to see that. I wanted to just say that I think a lot of community members in my conversations regarding the bond discussions and the town halls, people are saying that they want to see cost comparison of different options, and I think you all heard that, of new buildings, rebuilt buildings, fixing the buildings we have, discussions about consolidation. I think there needs to be a broader discussion. I think that's what I'm hearing people in my conversations talk about. I brought one of my neighbors to the town hall I went to, or I invited her to come, and she was happy to come, excited to come. I think that's great news. We just have to keep having the discussions. I'm really hoping that in the questionnaire that there will be not just focus on why didn't it pass, which was kind of the flavor I felt from the town hall, although great discussion, but more what would you like to see. So thank you very much. And just also hoping Dr. Malash is on his road. We haven't heard much. I'm hoping that we'll get an update as a community that he's hopefully in a good path to recovery. So thank you.
Thank you. Just
want to say, Dr. Malash, he's on the road to recovery, and He might be watching. So thank you for the well wishes, and we hope to see him back as soon as possible. So thank you.
Ready? Andy McIlvain, 23 Jade Lane. I attended the second forum at Carusi, and a couple of quick comments from the other side of the table. I think that there was some minor comment about the nature of the individual questions that were put forward, and I don't remember exactly what the content was, but essentially that they were backward looking. It wasn't a huge negative comment, but I think that the discussion at the end of the forum really did allow for people to look forward and ask forward-looking questions. So I think that that was an appropriate balance, and I'd like to commend the board for making that effort and being perceived and actually listening and hearing all of the good ideas, I think, that are coming out of these forums, and I think we'll continue to do so. I was particularly pleased by the senior citizen lady, being a senior citizen myself, about activities in the schools. And I thought, I used to play basketball over at West many years ago. And while my head still thinks I can get up and down the court, you might want to time me with a calendar as opposed to a stopwatch. And when did they raise the baskets? So anyway, again, thank you very much, and keep it going. One other quick comment, though. I think at the end of the forums, there will naturally be a kind of an accumulation and a processing of everything that you've heard. And this is just a suggestion. When you reinstitute the Strategic Planning Committee, there are a lot of good ideas out there. I follow on social media about different kinds of things. I think I've sent to Eric a couple of spreadsheets and PDFs about kind of different analyses of the way things might be done. It might be worth considering within, if it's possible, within the strategic planning effort, to engage in a dialogue as opposed to just having a 3-minute listing as it would be under a regular committee meeting, because the issues are really complex, as I'm sure you're all aware. But there are some really good ideas out there, and I think it would be a good idea to engage within that forum, if it was possible, with a discussion format as opposed to just a comment format. So thank you.
Thank you. And just so everyone is aware of the plan, what we agreed to, what was it? I don't know, a month ago or 2 months ago. There's a 3-prong approach that the board will be taking. The first is the public forums and the town halls to understand. The second is the survey that's going to go out to get input and feedback. And the third is we're going to take all that information and we're going to form an ad hoc committee between the board and the community to process all this data and all this information so that they can come back to the board to give us a complete readout or report out in terms of what all this, after we've accumulated all this data from the forums and the surveys, how, what makes sense of it for us, and make recommendations to the board based on that. So that's the 3-prong approach we agreed to, and what we're planning on, how we're planning on moving forward. Any other comments?
Good evening, Rick Short, 1002 Charlton Parkway. I think back a year. I think the board yourself with this whole fair funding thing. I don't know if you remember that one meeting where you guys were actually like trying to defend yourself against each other. It was pretty wild. I mean, Miss Judge, you could hear it in her voice that she cared about fair funding. She was working with fair funding. Miss Seidel was too the same thing. I mean, we know you guys care. Miss Schultz was a real long-time fair funding person. Miss Neary, I don't think there's any question that you guys care about fair funding. I'm going to use a great quote from Tom Cruise, and it's one thing, and it's only one thing, and it's to the politicians. And I'm going to be saying it to Greenwald, and I'm going to be saying it to Lampett, and I'm going to be saying it to Senator Beach. Show me the money. Show me the money. I know Eric Goodwin, because that's all it is, folks. Okay, I want to speak about a recent meeting I had with the district, with Dr. Smith and with Ms. Sugars. They have an open door policy, so it's anyone can call the superintendent's office and speak anytime you want. It was a very productive meeting. The main number that came out of it was $2.2 million for security. Sources of fund for this spring, hopefully, to firm up and offer basic security for 13 schools. Let's not forget our 3M glass enhancements. And most of all, from recent surveys a year ago, door reinforcements, very important for the public. I mean, you had a 90% response rate that people want enhanced doors with different things, like maybe 3M film. Also, sources of income. We have fair funding where we can get it from. Andy, our new, I call him the wisdom, the man of wisdom, is going to be speaking with Mr. Greenwald about the security money from the state bond. We also have what's called excess fund balance. I don't know much about it, but we can also use that for the $2.2 million. And I believe Mayor Khan offered a blank check, so we could take a loan, and loans have happened before. My last part is, let's not forget that this summer we can easily start fixing some of our interior schools 4 years before. Please advocate that we start a trust fund and start improving our science labs and interior schools and make them look better. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. I would like to say one thing, because there's this chronic undercurrent in my eyes and my perception of the past. So what I would like to see is us going forward with our verbal words and appreciating the fact that we are where most of the community wanted to be in having these forums. And that thank you, Mr. Sugars, and your team who put the questions together. With any kind of forum, the questions are never perfect. They certainly never seem to satisfy the public, but I think that what you're just attempting to do is very important for the community. And let us not forget that when these things happen, it's always because of leadership. So I thank you all for moving forward with leadership. I do have a concern about the budget process. This is probably directed to Mrs. Sugars, understanding that the governor has been allowed to delay his budget talk and puts us in a real time crunch for you to prepare a really good budget, because I did go to the BNF meeting the other night. Could you remind me, Mrs. Sugars, when I'm done, of what that timeline is again, please? I hear the word funding all over the place, and that's great, and I hope that we continue with the Fair Funding Committee and this other group that I know nothing about, the Fair Funding Action Committee. I don't know who that is. But in the meantime, as much as you want to change policy right away and do this and do that, we don't have a plan yet, okay, as to what the community really desires. Okay, and some of the things I personally have been reading on social media scare the heck out of me, because you won't see a bond for at least another 4 years. So as we go forward and we try to find money, then it's your job to direct the superintendent and his staff as to what the board directs, causes the direction. I would like to address you, Mrs. Schultz. Do not put any pickleball courts in. Okay, because I can tell you need to speak to the residents of Earlton Park South, because that was a real problem. The other thing I would suggest on your long list of suggestions that you're getting from community members is that at some point you need to bring the seniors and the people into our schools for tours, as I understand some of the board members have finally done, because then they can clinically see what's going on. So, but thank you for all that you do. It's a long road, but I'm glad we're doing it.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, do you have those dates, Ms. Sugars?
Yes, I know them well. So typically we get our state funding at the end of February. We have been told that that has been postponed to March 5th, which means we will get our state aid numbers on March 7th. Typically, statutorily, our budget is due March 21st for the initial submission budget. We have a board meeting on March 12th and a board meeting on March 26th. Whether or not we will be ready to present to the board on March 12th if we receive state aid figures on March 7th is what I am concerned about. We may need to schedule a board meeting if they don't change that March 21st date at some point, just to give us a few more days to put all of that together. Other than that, I haven't heard that they're changing our timelines, and then you know, our public hearing is typically, I believe it's scheduled for April 30th, so then we do have some time on the other side while it goes through review at the county office. So just wanted, you know, people to be aware of that there may be some changes coming as they change our timelines.
Thank you. Before we close, Dr. Smith, are there any final things that you'd like to?
Thanks for that opportunity, Mr. Goodwin. Just so many things have been said. I do want to give one shout out to the middle schools who held their 5th grade info nights recently. So that's Carusi, Beck, and Rosa. And as all 3 of them said consistently, which is where we're going, 3 great choices. 3 great choices. And so I wish all those 5th graders the best as they take it all in. And as always, the student speakers were the absolute stars of the evenings. Each school had student speakers, current students, talk about their experiences. So kudos to the middle schools, and thanks.
Thank you. With that, we're going to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Dr. Wong, Ms. Neary. All in favor? All right. Thank you. We're adjourned.